The Curse of the Velvet Curtains. The old house on the hill had been empty for years, its windows boarded up, its garden overtaken by wild vines and brambles. Yet, when Abigail's new tenants arrived, she couldn't help but feel a strange, unshakable sense of dread. They were a young couple, Sophia and Eric, newlyweds, eager to make a fresh start. The moment they signed the lease, the landlord handed them the keys with a tight-lipped smile, muttering something about the curtains. "I've left those for you," she said, pointing to the heavy, dark curtains that draped over the long windows of the living room. "Don't ever touch them after dusk." Sophia and Eric exchanged an amused glance, brushing off the warning as the ramblings of an eccentric old woman. They were in love with the house, the space, the charm, the quiet seclusion, but most of all, they loved the curtains. The deep velvet fabric, rich in texture, with intricate gold embroidery, was undeniably beautiful. It felt like something out of a forgotten era. On the first night after settling in, they hung their clothes by the window and sat in the living room, basking in the warm glow of the fireplace. The house creaked and groaned in the silence, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Sophia, tired from the move, glanced at the curtains. They fluttered slightly even though the window was tightly shut. She didn't think much of it, attributing it to the wind, but the way they swayed unnerved her. They seemed almost alive. "Let's go to bed," Eric suggested, his voice a little too eager. Sophia agreed, but as she turned to walk toward the stairs, a faint whisper caught her ear. It was so soft, so faint, that she thought she must have imagined it. But when she turned back, her heart skipped a beat. The curtains, no longer hanging straight, were now billowing as if caught in an unseen breeze. The whisper grew louder, and she heard a low, guttural murmur, like a voice calling her name. Sophia dot dot. Frozen, her skin crawling, she turned toward Eric, but he was already walking toward the kitchen, unaware of the strange occurrence. The whisper didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent. "Sophia, come closer." With trepidation, she stepped toward the curtains. Her hand reached out to touch the fabric, and as her fingers brushed against it, the temperature in the room dropped, sending a chill down her spine. The fabric felt cold, unnaturally so. Her fingers sank into the velvet, and a strange tug seemed to pull her forward, drawing her face dangerously close to the curtain. Suddenly, the room was plunged into darkness. Sophia gasped. She pulled her hand back and turned around, but the whisper had already become a shrill, haunting cry. "Sophia!" it shrieked, and then silence. Her heart raced as she fumbled for the light switch, but the house refused to obey. The lights stayed off. Only the flickering glow of the fireplace illuminated the room, and as the fire cast dancing shadows across the walls, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The curtains. They were moving, twisting, writhing. And now, Sophia realized with horror, they were alive. The deep velvet fabric swelled and stretched, twisting like serpents in the air. Something, a shadow, something unnatural, seemed to be slithering beneath the folds. It was a dark presence, ancient and malevolent, and it had been waiting. With a sharp gasp, Sophia turned to find Eric standing behind her. His face was pale, his eyes wide, and his body stiff. He seemed not to recognize her. His lips parted as if to speak, but when he opened his mouth, only a raspy, hollow voice emerged. "Sophia, you shouldn't have touched them." Before she could react, the curtains shifted violently, their fabric snapping with an audible crack. A dark, writhing tendril shot out from the folds and wrapped around Eric's ankle. He screamed as it pulled him toward the window, his hands clawing at the air as he was dragged against his will. "No!" Sophia cried, rushing forward, but the more she struggled, the more the darkness tightened its grip. She could see it now, a shape inside the curtains, a twisted face, its hollow eyes glaring out at her from the shadows. The presence, the curse, was awakening. "Get away from him!" Sophia screamed, but the voice from the curtains spoke again, deep and hollow, as if it came from the very pit of the earth. "You are mine now. You will never leave this house." In a frantic panic, Sophia grabbed the edge of the curtain, but as soon as her fingers brushed the fabric, her vision blurred. The room seemed to twist around her, and the temperature dropped to freezing. She felt herself being pulled, not physically but mentally, into the fabric, into the shadow. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed up by the endless darkness. By morning, the house was silent again, the curtains hanging still. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness, as if nothing had ever happened.